Hello everybody, this is Peter. Welcome to Cooking with Peter today. Today I'm going to be making for you one of my best no-knead bread recipes. It's really easy to do. This one is going to be with olives, Asiago cheese, and sun-dried tomatoes. Sounds delicious, right? It's easy to do. Follow my directions and you will not make any mistakes. Okay, I want to go over the list of ingredients with you today and also the equipment that we're going to be using. And by the way, if you're thinking that this bread recipe is for this type of bread like you would buy in a plastic bag, white bread to make sandwiches, it is not that type of bread. One of my viewers told me a little while back, he sent me a message kind of irate and said that, hey, this bread has a crunchy texture and soft inside and it's not what I wanted. Well, that's not what this type of bread is. It's going to have a crusty exterior and it's going to have a softer interior. So it's a rustic style of bread. So it's very delicious, and I've been making this bread for about 10 years. So I do know a few tricks. And by the way, if you'll stay till the end, I'm going to show you two things that I've learned to do, but I will not be putting those onto the recipe card. And also, you're going to have to watch the video at the very end because that's when I'm going to show you these two new things. All right, first of all, we're going to need 12 ounces of water. This is just cool tap water. I'm starting off with 12 ounces. You could do 12 to 14 ounces. I'm starting with 12 ounces. If it seems to be too dry, I'm going to be adding a little more water up to a total of 14. Here we have some Asiago cheese. Now, it's kind of difficult sometimes to find Asiago cheese, and I had to go to 3 supermarkets to find it. But I live in Oklahoma City, and it's not known for interesting things to some extent. So this is the type of cheese that I found, and it was in little packages like this. And then you want to make sure that you cut up the cheese into little squares. So I took this and I divided it into 4 pieces, and that's what gave me the squares. The cheese you're going to need is about 4 to 5 ounces of the cheese. Here we have a cup of chopped up olives. Now you can tell that I like the olives to be very chunky, and that's the type that I recommend for you too. 1 cup, 1.5 cups, you really can't go wrong. And here we have 2 ounces of sun-dried tomatoes. Now why just 2 ounces? Well, sun-dried tomatoes are pretty strong because they have been dried, and so their flavor is really intense. So if you put in too many sun-dried tomatoes, the flavor of the sun-dried tomatoes is just going to take over the whole bread, and that's not what we're after. We want the bread to have a kiss, so to speak, of the sun-dried tomato flavor, which is delicious. Okay, here we have 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. The type of yeast that I buy is in little packages such as this. I used to buy the yeast in larger quantities, but I don't make enough bread to really warrant that anymore. So I buy packages, I think they come in 3s, and that's the type that I buy. Always check the date on the package of yeast and make sure that that package of yeast is still good. Look right here, you'll see August of 26 rather. So this yeast is good for another year, but I will tell you that it expires way before that. And just get fresh yeast whenever you want to make some bread. Check the date. Make sure you have at least another year to go on the package and you'll be pretty safe. That is a rapid rise yeast. All right, we have 1 teaspoon of Italian seasonings. This is 1.5 teaspoons of regular table salt. Here we have just a teaspoon of regular white sugar. Also, we have some olive oil. You know how I feel about olive oil. Use a good quality olive oil because it's going to be a tasting ingredient in the bread, so make sure that you use a good one. I use a couple of ounces in the bread. Over here I have some flour, and we'll be using 3.5 cups of flour. You can use bread flour or you can use all-purpose flour. Either one is just fine. Okay, equipment-wise, we have the bowl here, we have a whisk, and then we have the Dutch oven. This bread is baked in the regular oven with inside a Dutch oven. So in fact, it becomes an oven within an oven. And so the Dutch oven is how we're going to get that really crisp texture onto the bread because it's really encapsulating the bread. And that's how the steam kind of comes back into and builds up that texture. We're also going to be needing a piece to stir up the dough as we make it. I always use this end of a spatula. So if you have a spatula, as this one is, sometimes I'll have a wooden end, sometimes I'll have a plastic. I see a lot of people on videos using this side of the spatula, and it's just going to get clogged up and gummy on there. So if you use the stick side, this side of the spatula, you'll have better results. So always use the stick side of the spatula. Okay, let's get going with our ingredients. And first, I always like to put in the water and the other ingredients first. Sometimes people will say they'll put in the flour and all the dry ingredients, then add the water. I just find I get a better mixture or mixing it up when I add the water first. So I'm going to be putting in the 12 ounces of just cool tap water. You might find you need more a little bit later. If you do, go up to a total of 14. All right, now we're going to be putting in our yeast. Here we have the salt, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasonings. You can use any type of Italian seasonings you have in the house, no big deal. All right, now use your whisk and just whisk that up. We're going to add in our 2 tablespoons, more or less. I used to use a couple of glugs, and put in whatever you want. It's not going to affect it much. So put in some good quality olive oil and stir that in. Okay, now it's time for us to be adding the flour. So I'll set the olive oil aside, bring my flour over, and we're going to be putting in 3.5 cups of flour. This, again, does not have to be exact. So sometimes, people are looking for exact measurements or exact grams. Trust me, you don't have to. I barely measure this stuff, to be honest with you, so I just use the scoop and shake method. Scoop up the flour, shake it off, and if you see too much on the top, just use your finger and just wipe it off like that. So we need 3.5 cups, so that's 2. Here we have it again. You can see I have too much. Just use your finger and just pull it off, just like that. No big deal. All right, now we have what's 1/2 cup, and again, I'm just eyeballing it. If you want to use a 1/2 cup measure, feel free to do so. You can see that I'm pretty much dead on that measurement of a 1/2 cup. All right, now we're just going to be mixing up the flour into our dry ingredients. Mixing up our flour into the wet ingredients, meaning the water and the spices. Just mix that around until you start seeing it come together. When it gets to be about halfway together, now we're going to start adding in cheese, olives, and the tomatoes. The reason you want to use this chunk cheese, like you're seeing here, is that if you use pre-shredded cheese or if you shred up the cheese, it's going to melt into the bread and you're not going to have any substantial cheese flavor in the bread. So make sure that you don't do that. Use the chunks of cheese. You can buy a bar of cheese and just slice it up. And by the way, if you can't find Asiago cheese, you could usually use grana padano or even a Parmesan cheese. But again, just buy the block. Don't be buying the pre-shredded stuff. Let's just put in the olives. And before I add the sun-dried tomatoes, I'm going to mix this up a little bit. Now I can tell that this is a little bit dry. So I'm going to drop back and just grab a couple of ounces of water. Okay, here I just have 2 more ounces of water. I'm going to use half of that and then continue to mix and bring it together. We may take the other ounce, but for right now, I'm just going to see how it comes together. The reason I'm doing this, adding the water slowly, is that I made one of these for us earlier today, and it was looking a little bit too wet, but it came together really, really well. All right, so now I have this started. Now I'm going to add the sun-dried tomatoes to this. Wow, that smells so good. So of course, sun-dried tomatoes are packed in oil, so you don't want to be using all the oil in there. So just try to squeeze out the oil. You're after the flavor, not the oil. We already have a couple of tablespoons of olive oil in there. So let's just not put that oil in there if we can get away with it. Okay, let's mix that up. I want you to take the spatula end of the spatula, I want you to reach down and to the bottom, pull the dough up and bring it up and push down. Turn the bowl, reach to the bottom, pull up the dough, push down. Turn the bowl, reach around the bottom, push down. Turn the bowl, reach around the bottom of the spatula, pull up the dough, push down. Now go ahead and push in the chunks of cheese if you see some kind of sticking out. So this, because I've put in 1.5 teaspoons of the yeast, I'm going to be putting this back in my Breville oven. It has a proofing feature on the oven, so I'm going to put this in for 1 hour, 30 minutes, and it's going to be proofing for us for that time. It'll at least double in size, maybe a little bit more. So let me put this back. I've already made one for us to continue the process with, so I'm going to bring that one up and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I went ahead and made one of these earlier today, and you can see that it has more than doubled in size. Now this has been sitting on my counter for about 2 hours, so it's a little bit more than double. So what we're going to do now is we're going to degas and stretch the dough. So just use the stick end again and reach in, and you're just going to move the dough around. We're just trying to get rid of some of the gases within the dough that's built up with the yeast. So now you can see I'm just simply moving the dough around. So just dump this right out onto the parchment paper. As you can see, the dough is very wet. Normal, because this is a high hydration dough, so it's going to be wet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my bread scoop, that's what I call it, my dough scoop, and just move the dough around. And we're going to bring it back on top of each other. So just reach under, pull it up, and of course it's going to be sticky. That's why you want your flour close by. Do not over flour, because the flour can burn. Okay, this dough is really sticky, so I drop back and I wet my hands to help with the process, and you can see that it works a lot better when you have wet hands or if you have a lot of flour on your hands. Now, this bread is very difficult to shape. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to clean the bowl that I used to make the dough, and we're going to set the dough inside of the bowl. The bowl is going to help us by keeping that shape round, and that's why I use the bowl to shape the dough. Okay, I have cleaned the bowl. It's sitting right here. I've also set out a new sheet of parchment paper, and I'm going to move the dough over to the new sheet of parchment paper just because it's more clean. Now I'm going to pick this up just like this. I'm going to set this right into the bowl. We're going to let this now set in the bowl for about 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to cover it. It's going to go through its second proofing, and then we'll be ready to bake the bread. Okay, it's been about 45 minutes since I put the bread into the bowl for it to go through its second proofing. About 15 minutes into the proof, I turned on the stove into 475, and I placed the Dutch oven into the oven so that it could heat up for about 30 to 45 minutes at 475. We're there now, about 45 minutes later, so I'm going to pull the Dutch oven out, and make sure when you do that that you're using oven mitts, because that Dutch oven is incredibly hot. So let me get that out. All right, here's the dough, and here's how it's come up. So that's been to the second proof. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a pair of scissors, and I'm going to cut some gashes into the bread, and that's going to allow the steam from the bread to escape. Now here's the reason we're using the parchment paper. It works as a sling. Move quickly over to this, put it in there, and now that's super easy to get back into that Dutch oven. We're ready to go, so I'm going to put this, again, use a pot holder, back onto the Dutch oven. We're going to go back inside, covered, 475 for half an hour. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes since the bread has been cooking in the oven. All right, so far, this is looking really, really nice. See that? Look how nice that's looking really great. So now, I want to get the bread a little more brown. I like it more toasty. So I'm going to put this back in the oven, probably another, 15 minutes or so, and then we're going to come back, take it out, and then I'll show you the finished product. Here you are, my friends. Look at this. How beautiful that bread came out. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? I'll take it out of the Dutch oven in a minute. But since you've held on, I want to show you a couple of things that I've recently done that have just kicked the bread to the next level. So when the bread is still hot, take some olive oil, you know, the good stuff, and just brush the top of the bread with some olive oil. Take some of the Italian seasonings that you put into the dough and just simply put a few more sprinkles of that Italian seasoning on top. The last thing you want to do is add a little more salt. So just put a little more salt onto the bread. And that's going to kick up the flavors, as my friend Emerald would say, to notches unknown. So here you have it, my friends. Look at that beautiful rustic bread. The smell is unbelievable. And it's so easy to make, as you can tell. It takes about 2 or 3 hours altogether once you get the dough put together. And you can be making bread as delicious as this. And by the way, if you would like to get the recipe, you can just click the link below. It'll take you over to my website, and you can download the recipe link over there for free. Now, your first inclination might be to cut this bread open right away. You don't want to do that. You want to let the bread completely cool, which may take an hour or so, maybe even 2 hours, to let the bread cool down. Otherwise, the inside of the bread is going to be very gummy, and you don't want that. Thanks again for watching the video today. Hope you make this, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.